Today's reading is from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. The law is perfected in love. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, we read, "The law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ." Grace means the power to rise spiritually. Truth means the experience of divine realities, not the application in the outer world of that inner experience. Divine love is the soul's experience of oneness with God. Kindness is the human manifestation of that love. Grace is deeper than mere kindness. Wisdom is a divine experience. Justice to all is a human law, though divinely inspired. It follows as a consequence of the experience of wisdom. Truth goes deeper than mere justice. While following the law, we should strive always to trace it back to its origins in the vision of God. Therefore, Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, urges the devotee not to be satisfied with spiritual precepts alone, but to go beyond them to the direct inner experience of truth. In the 18th chapter of that great scripture, he says, "Nay, but once more, take my last word, my utmost meaning have. Precious thou art to me, right well beloved. Listen, I tell thee for thy comfort this. Give me thy heart, adore me, serve me, cling in faith and love and reverence to me. So shalt thou come to me. I promise true, for thou art sweet to me. And let go those rights and writ duties. Fly to me alone. Make me thy single refuge. I will free thy soul from all its sins. Be of good cheer." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. Well, you would think that it's a Valentine message, but the word love is in there, but that's really all. Because it's the law that's perfected in love. And he takes it so very much more deeply than that, just a sentiment. But in any case, not that Valentine's Day is just a sentiment, just to say it. But it reminded me of the story of Yogananda granting an interview to a man who was extremely intellectual. And this man came in with a thick dossier of questions that he wanted to ask him. And Yogananda had tried to get out of this interview a little bit, but it wasn't able to happen. So he went and he had the interview with this man, and they sat down together, and this man started to read his first lengthy, dry, brittle intellectual question to Yogananda. And Yogananda listened very politely, and then he said, "Love God." And the man thought, okay, well, let me try again. So he came upon the second question. Similarly, took quite a while to ask the complex question. And Yogananda responded, "Love God." And the man just didn't get it and had another question, asked that question, and Yogananda stood up and said, "Love God." And then he politely excused himself and left the room. I remember one of the first books I read when I started to search spiritually was Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. And I don't remember if it's in that book or when I saw him live when I was going to Cal Berkeley back then. But I remember him saying that his guru was teasing him once and saying, "You're very complex, aren't you? Very complicated." And in Western culture, that's sort of like, yeah, that's great. But he knew that spiritually speaking, simplicity is what we're seeking, not this vast maze of complication, intellectual complication. And so it is with laws. I decided yesterday to look up on Google and see how many federal laws exist. And I came upon a whole bunch of different websites, and virtually all of them said, essentially, there's no way you can count all the billions of federal laws that exist in this country. It would take more than a lifetime, was the phrase that one of them used. You couldn't possibly begin to count them. I remember when Riemann, in his prior incarnation before Ananda, he used to be a CPA, and I would help him, and this is before computers. He had to subscribe to tax law, whatever, they would send you the updates, and they would come on that real thin paper, and there'd be sheaths and sheaths of them every week, 30, 40, 50 sheets that you had to file away with the new, just the tax code, just the tax laws and the explanations of it. What to speak of all the, massive amount of laws that we have in this nation for federal laws and the whole world, multiply it by hundreds of countries. It's just phenomenal what we do with our little intellect, with our little minds. I remember also going with our son, Kashi, when he was in high school, to his debate meets. He was in a debate class, and I had never done that in high school myself, so I hadn't been familiar with it. But I was struck that they're taught to debate, whatever the point is, they have to debate one side or the other of that point. And nobody listens to each other. They build their case, and then the other guy builds their case, and whoever builds the best case wins. But there's no effort to actually get at truth of a situation, and sadly, that's the downside of our justice system. I remember talking to this one lawyer friend once, and he said, it's not clean justice that you necessarily get in court. It all depends on how the case is built and what facts they choose to bring out and not bring out, and what picture they choose to paint. And that's what debate is all about. So justice to all, as it said in the reading this morning, is a human law, though divinely inspired. So there's hope. And thank God we have it. This justice thing, it was very helpful this last week and will hopefully continue to be helpful. But nevertheless, it's not the highest law. The law is perfected in God, is what the reading was saying today. In fact, Paramahansa Yogananda, whose teachings we practice here, he said that too many rules kill the spirit. And Swami Kriyananda, in his founding of Ananda, took that to heart. Too many rules kill the spirit. So at Ananda, in the residential communities, we have 3 rules. no drugs, alcohol, and no dogs. Now, the drugs and alcohol, because they alter our consciousness radically. And the dogs at Ananda Village was because we were in the countryside and they would run in packs and chase the deer. So at our local community here in Linwood, we interview our dogs. And if they don't bark too much to disturb our meditation, they get to live there too. Because too many rules kill the spirit. I remember in our community, when I first got up to Seattle here about, Rima and I were asked to come up in 1993. And it was shortly thereafter, there was a woman who lived in the community, and she was only there a very short time, and you'll understand why. She was absolutely fanatic about composting. She was just, she would get angry if people messed up on that. And of course, we believe in composting, we've got organic gardens and farms and all of that. But she was, for her, she would just get really emotional around it. And so at one point I was in the kitchen in the community with her, and she started ranting at me because this one person had put their trash in the wrong can. And she said, "What are you going to do about it? Are you going to kick him out of the community?" No. They want God, they love God. These are details. Of course it's better to compost. In fact, ironically, we have very good-hearted, kind-hearted gardeners now, farmers now, at Camino Farm and also in the gardens at the community where we grow vegetables. And everybody composts because they want to compost. That's how it works. It works through love. It works through being drawn from above, not being sort of pushed from below. And in the spiritual life, it's the same. It's not just in how we interact with one another, but too many rules kill the spirit. Also in the spiritual life. And Yogananda would exemplify that in his life. He had this one disciple who couldn't help himself. He was alcoholic. And Yogananda gave him Kriya anyway. And the story was that he would sit with his Kriya beads in one hand and his bottle in the other hand and try to do his Kriyas. And eventually his Kriyas won and the bottle fell away. So that's the love of the law that's perfected in love, when we are magnetized to our highest, when we want to expand, when we want to know God, then God extends a hand to us and we're lifted into that light. There's the story also of I think this is a Tolstoy story, of the three hermits who lived out on an island somewhere. And they were very simple-hearted. And they came up with this prayer, "We are three, thou art three, have mercy on me." And they would do that prayer together. And one day, word got to the bishop who lived on the mainland that these hermits were having that prayer. And he thought, I should visit them and I should teach them the proper prayers. It sounds like they really want that. And so he went out by boat to visit them, and he taught them, he stayed a few days, taught them these prayers, and then when he thought they had it, he left again. And as he was on his journey back on the boat, he saw this incredible light coming behind him. And he looked closer and he saw the 3 hermits in that light running across on top of the water to catch up with the boat. And they said, Sir, please stay a little longer. We forgot the prayer. Can you say it again? And he said, I think you should stick with your prayer. It seems to be working just fine. You know, we use the techniques to get us to a point where we can open our hearts and open our minds and become still and commune inwardly with God. Then we get to drop the technique. We use the law, the guidelines, the commandments, because they show us, if we do this, we'll be happy. If we'll do this, we won't be happy. They really show us our own inner reality, but we need to use them to the degree that we need them, and then we get to drop them. Once what Yogananda said, if you're doing Hong Sa or Kriya and you go into ecstasy, drop the technique. The purpose of the technique is to get you to that ecstasy. Experience that ecstasy. So back to the subject. I got a little bit away there. But in the mid-'80s, 1985 or so, Ananda community had been in existence in California, the first residential community there, for about, 15, 17 years or so. And at that point, Swami Kriyananda called a few of us over to his house. And we sat around and he discussed with us. He said, now, what do we think? How can we meditate on and come up with the right format for leadership of a spiritual community like ours? Because it was sort of haphazard at that point. And there were, 8 or 10 of us or so, and we meditated on it. And he pointed out, he said, the founding fathers of our nation were brilliant. And they developed this system of checks and balances between the Congress, the executive branch, and the Supreme Court, the judicial. And he said that was brilliant, for what it is in governing a free society. However, it's not quite it for our spiritual communities when we want people to be uplifted into God. So let's meditate on that. And then a few days later, he called us back together and he said he'd been meditating on it. And he asked everyone for input, as he always does, but then he said, I think we should have a general manager who looks out for the welfare of the community's operations as a whole. And he said, and then a spiritual director who looks out to make sure that the directions of the community are in line with our spiritual ideals, yes, but also looks out for the spiritual welfare of the individual. And it was really brilliant, that concept, to always be able to pull back and say, what is right spiritually for that individual? And I remember once or twice, I remember one occasion specifically where he happened to be visiting here in Seattle, and we happened to be faced with a decision that somebody was asking us about. And Riemann and I both felt a little uncomfortable with the question we were being asked by that person, because we thought it wasn't really necessarily good for the welfare of all or for that individual spiritually. But then Swami Kriyananda said to us, those are things to consider, but you should also consider spiritually for us to give a response to that. He said, we need to bend and bend and bend and bend in their direction until we think we can't bend anymore, and then bend some more. That is to say, allow the individual the scope to learn from their own mistakes, unless it's just morally wrong. If it's just off, or even badly off, but not morally wrong, give people the scope to learn from their own mistakes. And so these are brilliant principles that bring us into love. Because what is love but expansion? What is love but an opening of the heart and a broadening and an encompassing and a connection with all? In spirit, it's infinite. Just think of the millions of mistakes we've made that we've been somehow forgiven. And we get to keep on trying. We get to keep on moving. Yogananda said we've had so many lifetimes and we've been so many people and so many things. We've done it all, including all the mistakes of pirates and God knows what else. You know, it gives you pause. It gives you a moment of reflection to stand back, and the inability to judge others because they're but for the grace of God. And so that expansion in love is what we're going for. Swami Kriyananda, in his will, he left a legacy. It was also brilliant. It was two things. People are more important than things. Think about that a minute. People are more important than things. Seems simple, seems self-evident. But in the world, in general, of material consciousness, where things are the bottom line, where, all the wealth we accumulate is a measure of success rather than who we become in the process or who we are in our hearts. It's huge in this age, which is so materialistically encrusted. It's not a judgment, it just is. It happens to be what this age is. And so to just say and actually live by people are more important than things touches just about everything. And it doesn't mean that people's desires are more important than the other person's desires. It means people's spiritual welfare is more important than any project or anything that we can possibly think of. And then the second thing is, where there is right action, there is victory. That's straight out of the Bhagavad Gita. Right action is that action that brings us closer to God. Will it bring us closer to freedom and ego transcendence? Or will we become more ensnared in ego with that action? Where there is right action, there is victory. Those were the two principles. That was the legacy he left us with. Now go do it. There we are. Just like Bhagavad Gita reading this morning was just so perfect. Let go of those rights and writ duties. Fly home to me. Give me thy heart.
Listen to these words from Whispers from Eternity. Long ago, I had a little torch. It was a plaything of my mind. I toyed with it. A tiptoe I would work it, peering into dark secret corners of my thoughts. In its gleam I would capture glimpses in dark mental waters of many little golden minnows of creative ideas. I caught some of them and used them for bait to catch bigger denizens of my consciousness, but my hook was small and many large fish of inspiration got away. Now I carry a searchlight and no hook and line, but a net purchased with the precious gold-spun dreams of increasing understanding. With my large net of woven light, I will sweep the very ocean floor for thy wisdom. Ah, my expanding net will encompass all thy ocean. I will haul to myself all the goodness, golden deeds, and drops of inspiration, yes, to thy very self, and make all that my own.